This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Do you ever feel like your brain is getting in its own way? Like maybe you know what you should be doing or what's good for you, but you just can't quite get yourself there and your mind is racing and you have all of these thoughts. I know I feel that way. Sometimes when I'm trying to get things done, I feel like my mind gets in its own way and stops me before I can even start. And something that I found to be so helpful in those moments, honestly, is therapy and having an objective person that I can kind of talk it out with. So when I was preparing for baby Poppy and I had all of these different things going on, and it was like there were almost too many decisions to make, my mind was racing. I didn't know where to start. And being able to talk that through with someone was so helpful because they were able to, help me with skills coping skills and boundaries, like how to just take it one step at a time. And I feel like it really helped me see how I was holding myself back in those moments. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and it's suited to your schedule. And it's really easy to be matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch anytime for no additional charge. And right now, you can make your brain your friend with BetterHelp. Just visit betterhelp.com/minutes today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/minutes. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this very extra special episode of the Mindful in Minutes podcast. I'm really excited for today's episode because it is Mindful in Minutes' 6th birthday, which is bonkers. I feel like maybe in human years, that's still a child, but in podcasting years, that is middle age to maybe senior citizen in the podcasting world. And I just can't believe that 6 years ago today that I had released the first episode of Mindful in Minutes. And here we are now still hanging out. We're still in a closet. The closet maybe has gotten a little bit fancier. The microphone's gotten a little bit better, but we're still just doing our thing. And it makes me so happy. And I'm just incredibly grateful that you're here, whether this is the first episode you're listening to or we've been hanging out all the way back since 2017. I'm just so happy that you're here. And for the last few years around the birthday party, if you will, we've done all sorts of different things for the birthday. This year I'll say we're taking the birthday. It's a little bit low key. I'm still just transitioning out of maternity leave. It's a little bit more of a laid back birthday this year, which is okay. Those are great and beautiful too. But what I've been doing the last few years that I've really come to love is right around birthday time or birthday day is just doing an episode on reflections, things that I've learned in the past year. Last year I added then a few things that I'm looking forward to or dreaming of. And I really loved that. And so I'm going to do that this time as well. And just kind of looking at the year as a whole. So really no meditation or mindfulness content here. This is just us hanging out. I have a little beverage here, not an adult beverage. I've actually recently gotten really back into coconut water for hydration and potassium purposes for birth and postpartum. But so anyways, that's what I'm drinking. It's a little coconut water and then adding a little citrus to it. I don't know. I've gotten really into it. I don't know if it'll stick or not when who knows if it'll stick around. But right now that's my drink of choice. But we're just kind of hanging out and chatting and talking about life and what's been going on in the last year and all of that. And I just really look forward to doing this at least once a year with all of you because anytime it's a new year for the podcast, it's not only so amazing and humbling, but it also is really a time where I kind of reflect and look back. I do this every calendar year too, but a big milestone for me is always the podcast birthday year too, because I think out of all of the projects I've done, all of the endeavors, the different avenues that Yoga for You has taken, this podcast has been one of the most consistent. I've been doing it and doing it the same for so long with some changes, of course. But it also has brought some of the biggest changes in my life. Like, I think it's one of the things that's changed my life the most. And so it's always kind of cool to like look back at like another year of being able to do this thing that I love and connect with all of you. So while we're hanging out with my beverage, my hydration beverage, and maybe you are drinking something fun too or going for a walk, wherever we're hanging out, what I thought we could do today is I actually wanted to start with the things that I ended last year's episode with and kind of like, not necessarily grade myself on it, but just like revisit what I was hoping to do or welcome in this year and just kind of like check in and be like, I did this or I didn't do this or what that looked like. And then I wanted to share 6 lessons since it's been 6 years or 6 lessons / things that have really been on my mind this year, just in my personal life, and then ending with the things that I'm welcoming in or dreaming of for this upcoming year. I think this episode is one of the ones that it takes me the longest to kind of like write notes on it because there's so much like reflection that goes into it of just sitting and thinking. It's not even like it takes a long time to like write per se, but there's just so much like sitting and thinking and reflecting. And I really enjoy this episode every year because I feel like it's such a good thing to look at, different avenues of your life or look at different projects or different things that you're doing, different ways that you're showing up every so often and just being like, what am I learning from this? Or like, how are things changing? Or what's challenging, what's not challenging? I just think it's such a useful exercise in general. So thank you guys for giving me an excuse to do this exercise once a year. So let's start with how I ended last year's episode, which was 5 things that I was dreaming of for the upcoming year. So those things were releasing more control, more time with my gal pals, growing my family, growth in the Mindful Minutes community. And then I put 5 more years of doing this podcast. Of course, that one's like TBD, but we did do 1 more year. So getting closer to that one. So that one we probably won't even like revisit because I won't be able to do that until we're doing Mindful Minutes 10th birthday. But in terms of releasing more control, and this is where I did a lot of my sitting and thinking and being like, how did I do on that? And I'm not going to give myself like a grade, but I'm definitely going to give myself like honest feedback on it. So I actually think in terms of releasing more control, I think I did pretty well in this one. I think that this was almost like a be careful what you wish for situation, but it also goes right into something like a big learning this year for me, which was how much freedom you can have when you release expectations. A lot of what was happening in the last year, professionally, personally, like within my relationships, within my own self, all of that, it was just a big lesson in releasing expectations and kind of recognizing what is in your control and what is out of your control and what are you stressing about or holding on to that's just completely out of your control anyways. And I just feel like I kept getting this reminder that like expectations can set you up for disappointment and heartache and just much more struggles. What's the opposite of the path of least resistance? The path with the most resistance? I feel like the path with the most resistance, I'm sure that's not a phrase or a thing people say, but I feel like that path is just like littered with expectations and it makes it so much harder because you have all these expectations getting in your way. And this happened in a few different places. Like it definitely happened in terms of like growing my family. When I talk about that one, I'll share more about where I was at when I kind of was dreaming of that a year ago, just like my headspace and stuff. But even like growing my family, the pregnancy, which I mean, pregnancy lasts like so long, you guys. You know that. You know that. I know that. But there was so much, I think, with my first pregnancy and like my first like birth and delivery, and I'm not going to get into the details. No one signed up for like hearing my birth story here, which is totally fine. I don't really share it anyways. But so much of that, I feel like the first time around, I had a lot of expectations. I had expectations for like how my pregnancy was going to go, how my body was going to respond, like what was going to happen during birth, what then was going to happen those few days like after birth. I had such high expectations, and I really struggled throughout pregnancy the first time. And, my birth and labor was definitely not what I expected. It did not meet my expectations the first time. And I really kind of struggled. I've shared on here really openly about especially having a lot of postpartum anxiety the first few weeks, and something I've been doing completely differently this time is just like kind of no expectations, and not in a way. Sometimes it's in a way of like when it comes to like birth and delivery, it's like, just set the bar low and like, you won't be disappointed. But it's mostly in a way that feels really freeing of like, you know what, I'm just going to trust my body. It's going to do what it needs to do this time. This is something I think I think I've shared it here, maybe on Meditation Mama. This is just for anyone in general. You can advocate for yourself when you're at like the doctor's office. And if you find that weight or numbers on scale are triggering to you or not contributing to your mental health, you can advocate for yourself. And I'm doing it this time. It was actually my doctor's at the end of my last pregnancy when I kind of shared just like how I was really struggling. And you can say like, you can get on the scale backwards. You can say, please don't like say the number out loud. Please don't write it anywhere I can see it. Like, I don't need to know what this number is. And I did that from like the minute, like my very first appointment all the way through, where I was just like, you know what? I just need to listen to my body. My body's going to respond the way that it responds. And I don't need to have an expectation of like a certain number or anything. I totally just took that off the table. And it's been so freeing. And little things like that of just being like, you know what? I am just going to not have expectations or put these expectations on myself for certain things in life has created a lot of freedom and a lot more peace within my own heart when I started to let go of expectations for things, even expectations like within relationships. This is something too, I think I have this in my notes later on, but I just personally have been thinking about this one a lot, is that relationships are tricky, they're messy, they also take two people. And I think that a lot of heartache that can come in relationships, and I'm not even necessarily like, don't go starting any rumors, guys. I'm not talking about like in my marriage or anything like that. But even like relationships with, friends or family members or neighbors, like colleagues, any kind of a relationship that you have, that we often put a lot of expectations on the other person to like show up in that friendship in a certain way or in that relationship in a certain way. And they're not always going to meet our expectations. And so sometimes then we have to recognize that like maybe that relationship has taken its course, or that, you can kind of show up as your best in that relationship, but also then that person has to do the same for you, and that sometimes they won't. And like, not everyone is going to meet your expectations. And there's been something about recognizing that and just being like, you know what, like I had these expectations for what this relationship would be like, and it's not being met. And then that's brought me a lot of clarity as to like which relationships are worth, continuing to put energy into, and which ones maybe not so much. So there's a huge learning in expectations and releasing them. And that to me really ties into the releasing control, because this did look like kind of letting go of things that were a little bit out of my control, and not letting the stress of a thing that's out of my control like really impact me. And it's really created I feel like a lot more peace and freedom within my heart, and that feels good. So I think I did pretty well in the releasing control, but I think the universe kind of like gave me a little twist and was like, releasing control is good, but we're really going to teach you about releasing expectations. More time with my friends, I put in here gal pals. I did this. I don't regret a second of it. I mean, especially on my retreats, I got to do this, meeting friends like for walks, and so on. Something that I am so grateful for every single day. I've really been thinking about this a lot lately, is like the inner circle of women that surround me. Like, I count this as one of the biggest blessings in my life. Like, I'm not the kind of person where like, I'm like, I want a ton of friends or I need like a ton of friends, but I feel so blessed and so lucky with like the handful of like really incredible, beautiful women, like friendships that I have are so important and special and beautiful to me. And I am grateful for it every single day. So this is something that I want to continue to do, but I feel like this year a lot of the women around me really helped to kind of support and lift me up this year. And I want to kind of return that and continue to like support those women and like lift them up. And I never regretted a second of like prioritizing my time with them because it was just so great and special. And like, I feel like when you hang out with like a really good friend, like it just like heals you in a way. So that one I did. I want to continue to do. I wish I would have done even more. I don't know. It just like, I've really been, maybe I'm just like getting old or something. But I've just been finding so much value lately in like close friends and in a different way. Like for me, friendship just looks so different, like in my 30s versus my 20s. And it's not to say that it looks different, like one was better or worse, but I think that sometimes, like, at least for me in my 30s, like life feels a little bit more real, or at least some of the things that like I rely on my friends for or need lifting up from are sometimes like a little bit more serious than some of the things that I needed like support. Like I feel like my friendships in my 20s, like it was, a little bit more like fluid and like I had like, friends and like we had a good time and all of that. But like I feel like the friends that have like stuck around and the friendships that have really like grown and matured like in my 30s just feel like so deep and meaningful. And we're all kind of, dealing with like just some bigger stuff than we did in our 20s. So I've just been incredibly grateful for that. And any of you listening, you know who you are. Although, you know what? I don't think any, like, here I'm talking about how great my friends are. And I'm like, they don't listen to my podcast. But it's funny because they don't, just because they'll tell me that it's really funny because they know like they know me so well that it's just kind of like an interesting experience to then have like my voice in their ears, like leading a meditation. So I don't think a lot of them like listen, but they're very supportive of my work. But yeah. The third thing I was welcoming in was growing my family. And, of course, that is something that I wanted to do and that I did do this year. This one's extra special. Also, like some context, this is the last episode that I'm recording like ahead of time before I go on maternity leave. So as we speak, I am currently very, 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 like it's basically like my due date as I'm recording this. And so I don't know what is going to happen. I don't know what day I'm going to give birth. I don't know what that experience is going to be like. I don't know what it's going to be like after the fact. So a little bit of context with that because I have no idea what's about to happen. However, I am currently like due date pregnant. When I wrote this dream a year ago, this one's extra special for me because at that time when I was recording this episode last year, like my heart had really been yearning for like another child, for another baby. And I feel like, I'd been asking the universe for a while and and this was a big learning and releasing expectations because it just wasn't happening for us at that time. And it obviously did eventually happen, but it would still be several months beyond that before it did happen. And I was in a little bit of like a heavier place at that time when I was kind of like welcoming and manifesting and, wanting to grow my family, because anyone who's been in that situation when it's like, you're struggling with any kind of like fertility or whatever it is, it's, every month you can get your hopes up and then it just can be tough. And I was in a trickier headspace at that time, but I just like now looking back like a year from now, and this is like, granted, again, I'm pregnant. I have a lot of like feelings and hormones, so I'm going to try to not like get too emotional about it. But it's just one of those things where like for me, I hadn't looked at these things that I was like dreaming of and welcoming in, like I hadn't touched them since last year. I didn't revisit them until like today when I was doing this whole kind of reflection exercise. And it was just one of those moments where it's like, I wish I could go back in time to like give my past self like a hug from my future self, just because of like the heaviness in my heart at that time. And I do think that, things happen for a reason, or things happen like at their right time. And so obviously, I'm feeling really lucky and my heart is feeling like really full. On the flip side, like a year later, as I'm, sitting here recording a podcast on my little birthing ball, being like, I wonder if I'm even going to get through this recording without going into labor. But I don't know. It's just one of those things that it was just like, again, releasing expectations. My journey with my first child has just been so different than my second, and kind of releasing expectations, even being like, okay, this, maybe this isn't going to happen, or, maybe we were just meant to have one child, or maybe it's just not going to happen in the timeline that I want, like all of these things, right? Once I kind of released the expectations, which was after I had recorded this episode when I was feeling really heavy hearted, I just felt like a little bit more free in that. And then lo and behold, then the, universe came through, and surprise, I was pregnant. So anyways, that's one that just like, when I read that, it kind of was just one of those like, oh, like I wish I could go back and, and just tell myself, but we all have to learn these lessons in our own time. So even if we want to go back and be like, here's the lesson you're going to learn, like here's the end point all wrapped up in a little bow, so you don't have to go through the heartache of, the learning and the growing, but like that's the most important part. So that was one. And as you can hear, I might have to pause for a second, take a little sip of my coconut water, get my feelings in check. But that was one. And obviously, check, did that. The fourth was growth in the Mindful Minutes community. And the Mindful Minutes community grew for sure. I think when I had said that one, I wanted like a bigger growth, and I don't say that in a way of like, I'm like disappointed in any means. I'm not by any means disappointed in anything from like the growth of like this community. And like for me, it's all about just like that these meditations and these things reach the people that need them and want them. But when I wrote this, was like I wanted like Mindful in Minutes to grow. But the thing that's kind of cool, which I really didn't expect, was like Mindful in Minutes did grow, just kind of at like its normal, like regular rate. But Meditation Mama, which if you're newer here, I have a secondary podcast, which is fertility, prenatal, and postpartum meditations. Meditation Mama really grew, and I didn't really expect that. And I did see growth, but it was kind of in these like unexpected ways. And I did some different like experiments. Like I started putting like the podcast episodes like on YouTube, and then kind of like reviving and revamping like Meditation Mama. And it was like, it did grow at first when I look at it, and I was like, oh yeah, it kind of grew at like just, a regular steady rate. But then when I looked at some of the like unique places, like other places, I was like, oh my gosh, like that really, like this little happy accident happened, or like there was growth. It just wasn't, again, where I expected it, releasing expectations. So that was really cool when I was kind of looking at that, and I was like, wow, like the community is growing. And that fills my heart up so much. But it also was like really interesting to look back over a year and to see like which parts were actually growing. So that's been really cool. And it's just one of those things where it's like I really just kind of opened up and welcomed in like growth, but I didn't really specify. And so, I think that then the universe gave me growth, but wasn't necessarily like, super like specific or what I had in mind. And like, that's absolutely okay. So that was that one. And the last one, as I said, 5 more years of doing this. So TBD, we still have 4 more years to see if I do okay on that one. But yeah, that's kind of in terms, I feel pretty good looking over this list. I feel pretty good at giving these things that I was welcoming in like a good shot, and a lot of learning over the last year for sure. So then since it's the sixth birthday, 6 lessons that I learned this year, or 6 things that I've been thinking of this year. The first is your worth and your value, and these are in no particular order, just what came to my mind first. But your worth or your value is not tied to an outcome. I think this is more of like the business owner, like entrepreneur, like kind of like go-getter side of me. Over the last year, again, with kind of this releasing expectations, is I've also been trying to release my tether to outcomes. So this is really like, I think it's so easy to sometimes look at results or like quantifiable data, like things that you can count and be like, wow, this community grew on average by, this many listeners this year. And like, or every month, these episodes grew by this much. And looking at like data, which all of that I think is great and really useful, and it can be very motivating. But also, I think recognizing that there's natural ebbs and flows of everything, and all you can really do is just do your best, which that sounds like cliche. I can hear it even, kind of in my mouth. It's like, just do your best. It sounds like, the mom in me where I'm like, that's okay, pork chop, just, do your best. But really just doing your best and not allowing an outcome or like a quantifiable thing to be how you measure your worth. And so to say like, oh, my book, peaked at this number on the Amazon charts or whatever. And whether it, is number 1 on the charts or it's number 1 million on the charts, learning how to separate that, that's still a project that I'm incredibly proud of, and that I genuinely did my best and felt really good about putting out into the world. Regardless of the actual outcome, like that has nothing to do with like who I am as a person, my worth, my, personal self-esteem and those things. And I've really been trying to wrap my head around this idea of like a lot of the really great things in life, like the really beautiful things in life, they're not like quantifiable data. Like I can't say, oh, this year I increased my ability to be present with my children 5% over last year. Like I can't quantify that, but it's something that I can like feel in my heart, and to know that like it's really not useful to tie your personal well-being to specific outcomes of things, because sometimes like the outcome doesn't necessarily have anything to do with you. There's different factors. And this is just something I've been thinking a lot about, is for my own well-being. I think I've gotten better at it over the years, but I think this last year really, again, as I worked on releasing expectations, I found that it went with this like realization that for a long time I was, putting my worth and tying it to outcomes or, numbers or productivity or things that I could like measure. And truly like it has nothing to do with me. Whether something is a huge success or a total flop or everything in between, like that doesn't impact my personal value, like as a person. And learning how to separate those things was something that I worked on this year and that I want to continue to work on. So that's been on my mind a lot. And I don't know, hopefully that makes sense, because sometimes these things where it's more like just stream of consciousness and like I can think about them so clearly in my own life, but then when you try to like articulate it, you're like, I don't even know if that makes sense. But that was a big learning for me this year. Number 2 is that there is always a way to figure it out. I learned this every year. I'm positive this is a repeat. I learned this every year, but I feel like this year in particular, so much was new, so much was changing. There was a lot of unknown. And for me, it's really easy to sometimes get like frozen or paralyzed, like of like where to just like get started, or I can put off a project if I'm just like, oh, you just have to kind of like get the ball rolling on it, and you don't do that first like initial step. But every single year, I get reminded, and I can learn and continue to learn that there's always a way to figure it out. I did this with writing a book when I kind of first started this conversation with my publisher about turning Mindful Minutes into books. There's a lot of fear around that of like, can I do this? Like, I don't know. I've never written a book before. Or like when I wanted to create my meditation deck, like I really wanted to do it. I was like, but I don't know how to like create or like self-print and publish like a meditation deck. Like even this huge fear of like, how am I ever going to manage 2 kids at once? Like one kid feels so like chaotic, pork chop. We love him to death, but he's like sometimes just like a little Wolverine wrapped up in a tornado. And so it's like, how am I going to manage like 2 kids at once? And there's just been so many unknowns, so many changes, so much new, that time and time again, I have always had to remind myself that even if I've never done it before, even if it's going to be really hard, one of my biggest challenges, there's always a way to figure it out. And I always find so much satisfaction in figuring something out. Like even if it's Googling something, watching a YouTube tutorial, or just being like, you know what? I'm going to figure it out. People have 2 kids all the time, and they figure out how to have 2 kids. Like there's always a way to figure it out. And that was a really big learning. I feel like a lot of the projects that I did this year were new, and they were steep learning curves, absolutely. But there's always a way to figure it out. So that was number 2. Number 3, everything in life has seasons. I don't know what it is about this one, because like this idea of things being like cyclical, of living like with seasons, it's not a new thing, but it's just something that's really resonated with me lately, especially like the second half of this year, and how like everything is a season. I talked about this in the fall freeform episode about how, life, there's these 4 different seasons, and how different projects, different times of life, different things can be in like different stages or different seasons. The very short version of it is we all need these 4 different seasons, which is the time of birth, which, outside in the world is represented by spring, the time of growth, which is summer, the time of harvest, which is fall, and the time of rest, which is winter. But I've been thinking a lot, not necessarily about like the weather, but thinking a lot about how different stages in my life are different seasons or different projects. There's kind of this like idea of like birth, growth, harvest, rest in many different aspects of my life, in relationships, in work, in my own, personal work and endeavor. And also these different seasons have different combinations of like light and dark. Some like summer, it's light all the time. And sometimes in winter, like it's dark. And our life has those different seasons too, those different ebbs and flows of light and dark. And there's been something about embracing this idea. Maybe it's because it's comforting for me to think that in a way, everything is like temporary, or like if I'm in maybe more of a winter season right now, more dormant, more rest season, let's say like in, like professionally, like when I'm in maternity leave, right? That's going to be more of, in terms of like work, it's going to be in more of that dormant stage, like not, work, hopefully not really working at all, but probably not working very much. And that I need that season, and that's just as important. That's a huge part of the process. And then there will be then a springtime, there will be a rebirth, there will be new, there'll be different. And that all of these seasons, all of these elements make up like a cycle of things. Like even in my life, I talked about in the fall freeform episode, like how I feel like stepping into motherhood is kind of like my fall. Like, my childhood was spring, and then like my 20s was like my summer, and now my 30s have felt a little bit more like kind of the harvest in a way, and like starting this new cycle then like of children, like I'm watching their spring right now. And I've really been embracing that. And I don't know why, but it feels really right to me. It feels really comforting to me. And this is where I've been looking at relationships too, is that sometimes in relationships, you have like the beginning of a relationship. And again, no one started any rumors. This is not me like soft launching a divorce or anything. Because I recognize what I'm about to say like might kind of feel like that, but it's not at all. But I think about relationships, like even like work relationships or like other family relationships or friendships where it's like you have kind of that like birth and then you're like having a lot of fun, and then there can be like a cooling off period and like kind of a more rest dormant period of that particular relationship. And that's okay, and that's kind of the natural cycle of things, but like you can always pick things back up or maybe you change and go in different directions. But like things kind of have this beginning and end and these different stages in between, and just accepting that has brought a lot of comfort into my heart. And it's just something I've really been using for a tool of reflection. So anytime I'm feeling like stuck or feeling resistance in something, I've been reflecting on like, well, what season is that thing in? And sometimes I find that like maybe I've been in a particular season for too long. Like maybe I've been, in the kind of like summer phase of work for so long, like the, summer, fall phase of work of like do, grow more, that it's time for a winter. It's time for like, maternity leave, focus on something else for a few weeks. Like, that it's just time that I'll notice that I've just been stuck in one season for a little too long. And it's time to transition, because we need all of these seasons for like health and longevity. You can't be stuck in one for too long, especially in certain aspects of your life. Lately, I've been thinking about my wardrobe, and I really am taking like a less is more approach with it. And as much as I love, or would love to have high-end luxury goods, my wallet isn't always on the same page, but I still want a really nice like capsule wardrobe that has like timeless classic pieces in it, which is why I'm so grateful that I found Quince. And Quince is my go-to place for luxury essentials at prices that are within reach. They create timeless classics just like what I want, that never go out of style, and I feel like I can keep them in my closet forever. Like Quince's capsule wardrobe, they have things like 100% Mongolian cashmere sweaters from $50, washable silk tops and dresses and flattering pants, and everything's just so easy to like put together, and I'm basically obsessed. One of my favorite things that I recently got is the Mongolian cashmere gloves. I got them in the olive green, and I am loving them because they're really lightweight, but as soon as I put them on, they're so warm, and it's perfect for like those fall and winter walks with the stroller to keep my hands warm. And then I also got to try a 100% yak wool turtleneck sweater, which I was like, I need to try yak wool. And I love it. It looks so classic. It's super soft, and it's like this perfect kind of heather brown color. Plus, I love that Quince only works with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices and premium fabrics, and I love that. Get affordable luxury with Quince. Go to quince.com/mindfulminutes for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/mindfulminutes to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/mindfulminutes. So then the fourth thing is that there's no perfect time for anything. And sometimes if it's not a hard no, then it might just be a yes in disguise. So again, this year for me at least has been one really of a lot of change, a lot of new. And I feel like I leaned into a lot of fear this year, a lot of unknown. And there are a lot of times where I found myself feeling resistance or hesitation towards something. And it wasn't the like hard no feeling. I do think that anytime your gut is like, that is a no, do not do it. You need to honor and listen to that. But I think sometimes when we pause and we hesitate, something that I did more of this year that served me well was I kind of looked at that hesitation a little bit deeper. So what I do is when I had a hesitation, so for example, the book and, looking at like, or even like my meditation deck or something, when I would have a hesitation to actually doing the thing, I would kind of pause and ask myself, what is the hesitation? Is it, my gut saying, no, this isn't the right time, or it's not a good time, or not a good idea, or whatever? Is it a gut reaction? And if it wasn't a gut reaction, then I would dig a little bit deeper and be like, what's the hesitation here? Is it fear that I can't do it? Is it a fear of failure? is it a worry that I'm not like good enough to do this? I'm not deserving of it? Is it I'm feeling tired and I don't want to put more on my plate? Like, I really felt like in moments of hesitation, I guess falling back on like one of the basic principles of like mindfulness and meditation is just like pause button, take a deep breath, and then dig a little bit deeper and just objective observer. What's the real hesitation here? And time again was that my hesitation often wasn't, it was something else. It wasn't a no per se. It was maybe me just being like, well, I don't know, it's not ideal. Like, I want to do this, but it's not, it definitely wouldn't be the perfect time to do this. And there is no perfect time to do things. Of course, there's better times than others, but learning how to question my hesitation, again, always trust your gut. Hesitation is totally different than like, you're always trust your gut. Always, 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 always. But when I'm like, oh, I don't know, or like I feel that kind of like conflict being like pulled in two different directions, digging a little bit deeper and asking myself, what's the hesitation here? I found really helped to gain clarity and to see where I was actually struggling and not like just being kind of stuck in this, like, I don't know what to do. So that was one that kind of an unexpected one that came up as I was reflecting, is that like there's never a perfect time, but sometimes like a hesitation doesn't necessarily mean no. It just means dig a little bit deeper so you can get some more information before you make an answer or make a decision. Number 5, this one I imagine is a repeat too, or a reiteration of something, but I can't stress this one enough, is that small daily steps can lead to huge progress over time. And you've heard me describe like projects or building a business or running a podcast. It's kind of like building a house. Like, you have to start with the foundation and then you show up every day and you lay bricks. And that's not necessarily like the sexiest answer for things, right? Maybe when you're building your house, you want to start with like interior design or like, I don't know, the big master bathtub you're going to put in. I don't know. But really, you just have to show up, especially when you're starting something new, every single day, put in the hard work and like lay those bricks. And I have found that like tracking the small steps can be so motivating and useful on the days where you show up and you're like, I am tired of laying bricks. I do not want to show up and lay another stinking brick. But when you keep track of like how much you have done. So for example, you guys know I love a good spreadsheet around here. Since the beginning of Mindful in Minutes, I have kept a spreadsheet where I just make note of like how many downloads the podcast had that week. And it was a way at first to kind of look at, and be like, what types of meditations like are resonating with people and not so much. And I now have 6 years worth of data. And there's absolutely times, not that I am not so grateful for this podcast every single day, I am. But even when you're living your dream and you're doing something that you love, you still sometimes show up to work and you're tired, or you think like, oh my gosh, like, wouldn't it be easy if I just had a regular job, and when I went on maternity leave, like there's like someone else that would take over my work, and then, I could come back, versus like when you work for yourself, that just means like doing more work ahead of time. Like, there's still these little things where it's like some days you show up and you're like, I feel really tired and I don't know if I want to lay more bricks. On those days, looking back at all of the small steps, I have found to be so useful. Like, every week, maybe there's just a few more people that listen, a few more people that listen, like a few more people that listen to this meditation every week. And it feels like the dial's barely turning. But then when you do that and you keep track of your little small steps for something like 6 years later, and then you look and you're like, oh my gosh, like all of those little steps, all of those bricks that just, I keep showing up every day and laying bricks, like look at how much it has changed over time. And it really just, it's mind-blowing. Like, if you, again, like sometimes your, future or present self, you like want to go back and talk to your past self. But like, if I right now could like rewind the clock 6 years and be like, Kelly, listen, 6 years from now, not only are you still going to be doing Mindful in Minutes, but you're also going to do like Mindful in Minutes retreats. Like, it's going to be, a book. It's going like all of the things. I never would have believed you, because I would have looked at the here and the now and been like, how could that be possible? Like, look at this. There's like 10 people listening to your podcast. And I just like, I don't know, every year it gets me that it's like, you just show up every day and you lay those bricks, and like little small things that feel insignificant now over time, like persistence does pay off. And I'm just reminded of that every single year. And it's something that I've held on to in podcasting and business, also like motherhood, relationships, all of that, is that sometimes you just have to show up and keep laying bricks. So yeah, so there's that one. The sixth and final thing that I've thought a lot about this year is just how much podcasting has changed in the last 6 years. Like, I joke that this podcast is basically like geriatric now because it's 6 years old, but podcasting was a completely different like planet when I started. The hardest part about podcasting, there are two things when I started in 2017. The first was just getting people to understand what a podcast was and how to listen to it. And then the second was like the tech element is way harder. Like, I didn't have tools like I do now where you can just go to like Anchor and like literally start a podcast in like a day. When I first started my show, it took me like 3 or 4 days just to get my show like approved and like make it work with like Apple Podcasts. It was so much clunkier back then to like actually like the back end logistics of a podcast 6 years ago was so clunky. It like was all of these like websites, I feel like, that looked like they were like a bajillion years old. And it really was just kind of like trial and error. And now it's just so different. Like, I feel like I don't necessarily like, I'm definitely not in, I don't know, in like I'm not up with the times when it comes to podcasting, but also I'm kind of fine with that. Like, even though I do feel a little like a geriatric podcaster, and like so many people are starting podcasts now, like it's growing by the minute and the tools are so much better. It's like this whole big like industry now, podcasting. And I'm just finding so much joy in just like doing my little thing in this little corner of the internet and just like chugging along and writing my meditations and recording them and putting them out there. And it just brings me so much joy. But I do stop and think sometimes of just like how different it is. Or like people will ask me, they're like, if you were starting a podcast today, what would you do differently? And it's so hard for me to answer that question because it was just truly a completely different thing when I started 6 years ago versus now. I wouldn't even know where to start now because it's just like, I don't know, it's so different. And that just like blows my mind. So that's something I've been thinking about a lot too, is how much just like a certain space, like when you get into it, not that I was like by any means like the first podcaster, but when you get into something before like a big boom in it, like how different it is. And I feel like I've watched the transformation of podcasting as a whole, like transform in front of my eyes. And here I am still just sitting in a little closet making these things that bring me so much joy, and I'm not going to stop. But it really is kind of mind-blowing. So then things that I am welcoming, so 6 dreams that I'm welcoming for the next year. Hopefully, if the universe is kind to me, we will be here again in a year and I can kind of give myself feedback on how I did. But the first thing that I want to do is I want to welcome simplicity and ease into my life without necessarily having to like have less abundance. So what I mean by that is I really want to just let things be a little bit easier. So I want things to be a little bit more simple. This coming year, I want to, like, I'll definitely be doing some new things. You guys know, like at the beginning of the year, I have a really big project coming out around meditation and anxiety, which you'll hear about a little bit later this fall and winter. And so I have like that big project, but this past year was so much new and change and like figuring out and releasing expectations and all of that now this year I'm really into, like, if last year was like a summer season, this is going to be more of like this year a fall season where it's like I just kind of enjoy the fruits of my labor or like enjoy my harvest and just being okay with like letting things just be kind of like simple and like welcoming just ease into things and like looking like where am I making it harder for myself than I need to be. So really just welcoming in simplicity and ease into my life, but not necessarily sacrificing abundance for that. So like how can I keep things where they're at, but just make it a little bit more simple and a little bit easier. That's kind of what I'm craving for this year. I'm spending more time being present with my family. I think that like when Pork Chop was born, we were in a completely different headspace. Like, that was like almost 3 years ago. And just different, we were still like single income and, figuring out like we were just, me personally, and like in my family, we're in a completely different space than we are now. And so I feel like a lot of the beginning of Chop's life is like such a blur. And I want to just be a little bit more present with my family, especially as I, kind of integrate and we go from one child to two. Like, I want to just make sure that I'm holding space for that in my heart. I want to return to my study of meditation. So I feel like I've been doing a lot of meditation, like application, but I want to do just like some personal learning for me. And like whether it's like take a course or pick up a few, more books than I usually would. And just enjoy like being a student again is something that I'm welcoming in. And then traveling just for me. So I used to solo travel so much, like all the time. And I haven't done any travel that wasn't either family related or work related in a very, very long time, like years. And so I would like to welcome in at least one little trip just for me, maybe like a girls' weekend, anything, like just a little travel, a little solo travel just for me, not family, not a family trip, not a work trip. I haven't done that in a long time. And that came up for me when I was thinking about what I'm welcoming in. And then I want to continue to grow Mindful in Minutes even more. I'm welcoming in more growth, but again, like in that simplicity and ease. So like I want even more people to hear these meditations, like the people who need it, the people that are looking for it. Like I want this to be readily available and easily accessible, and like I want it to fall into their laps. And like that's the kind of growth that I'm looking for, is like just more beautiful people in this community. So of course, you guys can always help with that, with your reviews and sharing and, all of that. But I also just am kind of putting it out into the universe that it's like my intention every time I hit publish is that it reaches the people that need it. And I just want to continue to do that. And like just reach even more people, because I really do think that like meditation and mindfulness is something that's changed my life so much. It's really softened my heart. It's really made my life better. And I want to continue to share that with others in the hopes that maybe it'll make their lives better too. And then the final thing that I'm welcoming in this year is making more decisions based on my own happiness and less on what people want or expect. So I think just continuing to tap into my true self, asking myself, like just making decisions based on like my happiness, not in a selfish way, but just in a way of kind of asking myself, is this what I want? Is this what's going to make my heart happy? Or am I feeling like this is what people want of me? And really releasing a lot of the, this is what people want of me, and embracing the, this is what I want for me. And just making more decisions based on my own happiness is something that I'm welcoming in this year. So that is that. Those are how I did over the year, what I've learned, what I'm looking forward to, what I'm welcoming in. Thank you so much for being here it's mind blowing every time I say it, for 6 years. And I'm just so grateful that you're here. I cannot tell you enough. No, like I wish I could just give all of you like a big hug and like write you a thank you card for being here with me on this journey and being a part of this beautiful community. And I just appreciate you so much. So thank you for being here. I hope you're having a beautiful day. And I will see you on Sunday for meditation.